Every day, the dog came back. Every day, the people shouted, threw things, and forced it to leave. It was just a stray, dirty, skinny, and uninvited. No one wanted it near their homes, especially not near their children. But one day, everything changed, because the same stray they all feared saved the life of the very child whose family had tried hardest to chase it away. And what happened next? It brought an entire neighborhood to tears. Welcome to Paws and Claws, where we bring you powerful animal stories that go beyond fur and paws, stories that touch the soul. Today's tale is about misunderstanding, fear, and a love that needed no words. If you've ever believed that animals can sense danger, or that heroes sometimes come in unexpected forms, this story is for you. The first time the dog showed up, no one even noticed. It was just a shadow at the edge of the woods, blending into the trees, silent and unmoving. The air was crisp that morning, cool, fresh, with a scent of pine drifting through the breeze. Sprinklers clicked on, coffee brewed in kitchen pots. Doors opened with lazy yawns as parents called after their kids, urging them not to forget their backpacks or lunchboxes. It was a neighborhood alive with calm, ordinary life, and right on the edge of it, something not so ordinary watched quietly from behind a thick bush line. The dog. No one knew where it came from. No one even really saw it that day, but it saw everything. By the second day, someone did notice. Mrs. Ellen Peters, 72 years old, retired schoolteacher, a daily walker who prided herself on knowing every leaf, every squirrel, and every neighbor's car by the sound of its engine, saw something strange as she passed the east side of the neighborhood. There, just beyond the little wooden fence that lined the McCrae's back garden, stood a dog, big, still, not panting, not barking, just watching. She paused, frowned, pulled her knit cardigan tighter around her shoulders. "Shoo," she said aloud, though softly. The dog didn't move. She took another step. "Go on now. You don't belong here." Still no movement, just eyes, golden white eyes, watching. Mrs. Peters picked up her pace and walked on. By the time she reached home, she was unsettled. "Big stray over by the McCrae's," she told her husband. "Didn't like the way it looked at me." By the end of the week, everyone had seen the dog. It was there in the early mornings, always in roughly the same spot, sometimes sitting, sometimes lying down with its head resting on its crossed paws, but never causing trouble, never barking, never approaching, just watching. At first, the neighbors tried to ignore it, but slowly unease crept in. "Is it sick? Why doesn't it leave? Is it someone's abandoned pet?" Mr. Renner from down the street tried to shoo it off with loud claps. It didn't flinch. Teenage boys tossed a few small stones at it once, not to hurt it, just to scare it away. It blinked, stood, and calmly moved 5 steps back, and then sat down again. And every day, it came back. Even the neighborhood dogs barked at it, but it never barked back. It just stood there, looking toward the rows of backyards, particularly, though no one noticed at first, toward the Johnson's place. Sarah and Mark Johnson were new to the neighborhood. They had just moved in 3 months ago with their newborn daughter, Emily. It was the house with the lavender curtains and the bright red mailbox. Emily was the darling of the street. Everyone loved cooing at her little face, her soft curls, her tiny shoes that were more decoration than utility. Her parents were cautious, understandably so. New parents tend to see danger in everything, and to Sarah, this mysterious dog was no different. Mark came home one evening to find her peeking nervously out the nursery window. "It's back," she said. "The dog." She nodded. "It's just sitting there again, watching the yard." He joined her at the window. There it was, by the fence, still as ever. The setting sun caught a shine in its coat, but even from this distance, Mark could see its ribs. Thin, undernourished, but not wild, not aggressive, just quiet, calm, oddly focused. "Probably just a stray," he said, "looking for food." "It's been 4 days, Mark," Sarah whispered. "It's not normal." The next morning, Sarah called animal control. She described the dog, explained it wasn't aggressive but wouldn't leave. They made a note, said they'd send someone within 48 hours. But 2 days came and went, and no one showed up. The dog remained. The neighbors began to whisper, "Has it bitten anyone?" "No, but it's always watching." "Should we be worried about rabies?" "I heard stray dogs sometimes circle back where they were abused." Someone said maybe it had been dumped and kept returning because it used to live in the area. Someone else claimed it had been seen chasing a rabbit down near the creek. That was enough for the more panicky parents to demand something be done. The HOA called another meeting. Flyers were printed. Emails were sent. The message was clear. We must not allow a stray to linger around our children. What had started as discomfort quickly morphed into suspicion, and then fear. One morning, a child dropped their toy too close to where the dog sat near the bushes. The moment the little boy stepped closer, the dog stood up. It didn't growl, it didn't move toward him, but the sight of it rising was enough for the mother to scream and pull her son back. That scream rippled through the neighborhood. It wasn't about the dog standing, it was about the idea that it might do something. Now, fear took over reason. Soon after, someone threw a rock, a bigger one. It hit the dog's side. It yelped, the first sound anyone had heard from it, and limped away into the trees. People watched it vanish. Some felt justified, others uncomfortable, but the dog returned the next day, this time with a slight limp and deeper eyes. Watching the dog's return after being injured should have been the end of the story, but it was only the beginning. That morning, people didn't just notice the limp, they noticed something else. It had a gash along its right leg, not deep, but visible, and yet it wasn't whining, wasn't showing pain. It sat like it always had, just on the edge of the property line, back straight, ears relaxed, breathing calm, a silent sentinel. And now, people weren't just afraid, they were divided. Inside the Johnson house, Sarah stood behind the nursery curtains, peering out like she had for the past week. She had taken to watching the dog for hours during the day, almost without realizing. She hated it, hated how it made her feel, tense, small, like something was waiting to happen. She didn't trust it, didn't like that it kept returning, didn't understand why no one had taken it away yet. "It's not just waiting," she said to her husband one evening, arms folded tightly. "It's watching the window, Emily's window." Mark leaned over her shoulder, brow furrowed. "She's just a baby. It doesn't even know she's there. Then what is it watching?" Neither of them had an answer. The HOA meeting that week was packed. The dog had now been around for almost 10 days. Too long. Long enough to be branded a threat, at least by some. "Someone needs to take care of it," one father said. "It could snap at any moment. We should call in private animal control," someone else offered. "Pay out of pocket. I don't want to wait until something happens to one of our kids," said another. "Do we want to read about this in the news?" But amidst the panic, a few softer voices pushed back. "It hasn't hurt anyone. Maybe it's waiting for someone. It could have attacked those kids who threw rocks, but it didn't." The room was split. Lines were forming, not just about the dog, but about the way fear was being handled. On the 12th morning, something changed. The dog didn't appear. People peeked through blinds, walked down sidewalks pretending to check their mail, but there was no sign of the familiar, golden-eyed shadow. Some felt relieved, others unnerved. Sarah found herself pacing the nursery floor, holding Emily a little tighter than usual. The dog's absence felt louder than its presence ever had. Then, around noon, a storm rolled in, fast and angry. Rain lashed against the windows. Wind shook the shutters. Thunder cracked hard enough to wake Emily from her nap, her tiny cries piercing the stormy silence. Sarah rushed to soothe her, whispering lullabies, heart pounding for reasons she couldn't name. Just as she turned from the crib, a flash of lightning illuminated the backyard. And in that flash, only for a second, she saw it, the dog, standing still, soaked unmoving, its head turned directly toward the nursery window. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She sat by the crib, flashlight in hand, curtains pulled tight, her nerves fraying like old rope. The next morning, she called the city again, then the HOA, then the police department's non-emergency line. "No," she told them, voice tight. "It hasn't been aggressive. It hasn't bitten anyone, but something isn't right." By noon, 2 animal control officers arrived. They walked the perimeter, asked questions, saw the patch of dirt where the dog usually sat, saw faint paw prints. "We'll try to set a trap," one said, "but if it's smart, it won't come close again." And they were right. For the next 2 days, no sign, no eyes, no shadow, no stillness. It was just past midnight when Sarah heard it, a low, guttural noise outside her window, like a whine, but deeper, mournful. She froze. Emily stirred in the crib. Mark was asleep in the other room. Slowly, Sarah crept to the back window and peeked between the blinds. There it was, the dog, but it wasn't at the fence. It was on the porch, soaked, bleeding, leaning against the screen door. Its eyes, glassy, unfocused, stared not at Sarah, but toward something inside the house. That was the moment Sarah screamed. Mark came running. Emily wailed. By the time they got to the porch, the dog was gone, but in its place was blood, drops of it, a trail, leading back toward the woods. The next morning, things moved fast. Mark and a few neighbors followed the trail into the forest behind the houses. It was faint, the blood already beginning to wash away from the night's rain. They followed it anyway. One man called out, Why are we even doing this? It's a stray. But Mark couldn't shake something Sarah had said to him. It wasn't looking at me, Mark. It was looking at her room, like it knew something. That thought clung to his spine like ice. Deeper into the woods they went. What they found wasn't the dog. It was a pile of chicken bones, old wrappers, pieces of clothing. Someone, or something, had been living back there, watching, waiting. The woods were quiet, too quiet. Mark and the other men stood around the crude shelter they'd found. It was little more than a lean-to made from fallen branches and a torn blue tarp. Inside were signs of someone, or something, having stayed there for weeks, maybe months. There were chewed-up plastic bottles, a rusted old flashlight, wrappers for meals no one in the neighborhood recognized, and most chilling of all, a child's pacifier. It was old, dirt-smudged, and half-buried in a pile of leaves. Maybe someone's been squatting here, one of the men said. Mark picked it up with 2 fingers, heart-thumping. Emily used that exact brand. He said nothing, just slipped the pacifier into his jacket pocket and turned back. By the time they returned, word had spread like fire. People whispered about the shelter, about the blood on the porch, about the watchdog that kept returning. That night, someone posted on the neighborhood Facebook group, "If the dog is connected to whoever's living out there, we should be worried. Our families aren't safe." Another posted, "What if it's leading someone here?" Fear mutated. Some said the dog was part of something bigger. Maybe it was trained. Maybe it was scouting. Maybe it was only pretending to be a stray. In a town where nothing much ever happened, people began locking doors in daylight, checking baby monitors twice, and looking over their shoulders just to take the trash out. Sarah, meanwhile, barely slept. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a warning. Every wind gust felt like a knock on the window. She checked Emily's room 10 times a night. And worse, she missed the dog. As strange as it sounded, its absence made her feel more vulnerable than its presence ever had. 3 nights later, the scream echoed down the street. It was past midnight again, the hour when fear feels sharpest and instincts louder. Mr. O'Neill, a widower who lived alone 2 houses over, had stumbled outside in nothing but his slippers, yelling something unintelligible. Neighbors came running, lights flicked on, doors opened, people gathered. Mark was the first to reach him. What happened? Mr. O'Neill was pale, trembling. He pointed toward the side of his house, breath ragged. "It was right there," he gasped. "Outside my window. I saw someone, a man, tall, dirty, just standing there, watching." Panic spread. Police were called. Flashlights swept the area. They found no man, but they did find paw prints, leading from the woods to Mr. O'Neill's house, and back again, right next to a larger, bare footprint, made by a human. The next morning, Sarah sat on the nursery floor, eyes hollow. She hadn't told anyone about the pacifier Mark had brought home, but now everything was connected. The dog, the woods, the bloody porch, the figure at the window, the constant watching of Emily's room, and one more thing, the pattern, because the dog hadn't just been wandering. It had always stayed in front of the same house, their house, and every time it had come closer, from the fence to the porch to the door, it was reacting to something, not them, but to someone else. The final straw came the next day. Sarah had just laid Emily down for her afternoon nap. Mark was at work. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then the baby monitor let out a soft, staticky pop. Sarah looked over. The screen was dark for a moment, then blinked back on. She frowned, glanced down the hall. Nothing. And then movement, not from the nursery, from the hallway. A flicker of shadow, a whisper of motion. She grabbed a fireplace poker and crept forward, heart thundering, her instincts screaming at her. Every step felt like walking through molasses. She turned the corner into the hall and stopped. Nothing. Then from the window, a low sound, a growl, a whimper. She yanked open the curtain, and there it was, the dog, back, panting, bleeding again, eyes wide, freaked out. Its gaze flicked not toward her, but past her, over her shoulder. She turned and screamed. It happened in a blur. The police said later that it was a home intrusion attempt. A man, mid-40s, malnourished, likely suffering from a psychotic break, had broken into the crawlspace 2 nights before. He'd been watching from underneath, planning, waiting for what, they couldn't say. But what stopped him was the dog, because when the dog reappeared, it had gone to the window and seen him in the hall, and it had barked, for the first time. Loud, violent, urgent. That bark saved Sarah's life. It made the man flee, startled, right into the waiting arms of police already sweeping the area because of the earlier sighting at Mr. O'Neill's. He was caught, arrested, and finally, the truth came out. The man had been living in the woods. He had seen the family move in. He had fixated on Emily, on Sarah, on the routines, the layout. He had planned something, but the dog had been there the whole time, watching, guarding, intervening, silently, patiently. It had been following the man, keeping him at bay, not hunting him, but protecting what the man had been watching. The dog had known. It had tried to warn them for days, for weeks, and they had ignored it. The day after the intruder was arrested, the Johnsons' home felt different, calmer, yes, but also heavier, because now they knew. The thing they'd feared, the mysterious, bleeding dog, wasn't the danger. It was the shield between them and the danger. It had been bleeding not because it was sick or injured by accident, but because it had fought for them. Mark sat at the kitchen table, staring at the newspaper on his phone. The front page had a blurry picture of the dog, captured by someone on their phone in the chaos the night before. The headline read, "Mystery Dog Foils Intruder in Quiet Suburb," but it was the subheadline that hit him hardest. Police say stray may have prevented a tragedy. He set the phone down. A single phrase played over and over in his head, and we tried to get rid of it. That morning, Mark drove to the police station, not because he wanted to file another report, but because he had a hunch. There had been something in the way the dog sat, its alertness, its calm under pressure, its discipline, the kind of stillness that doesn't come from nature, but from training. He approached the front desk and asked for Officer Bradley, the only K-9 unit officer in the small department. Bradley met him in the lobby, tired-eyed but polite, and when Mark showed him the photo from a news article, the officer froze, then looked closer, then said, "That's him." Mark blinked. "What do you mean?" "That dog," Officer Bradley said slowly. "That's Rex." Rex had been a K-9 unit dog for 6 years. Loyal, sharp, highly trained. He'd been Officer Bradley's partner until a car crash during a pursuit nearly killed them both. Bradley survived. Rex went missing, thrown from the vehicle into the woods. A massive search was launched, but they never found him. Until now. He survived all this time. Mark asked, stunned. Officer Bradley nodded, his voice thick. "And he saved your family. Even after everything, he still did his job." They sat in silence. The pieces were falling into place now. Rex hadn't just been wandering. He was tracking. He had sensed the intruder, had tried to scare him off, had watched over the house, because something told him it was in danger, and no one had listened. Rex was found in the woods the next day, barely moving, lying beside the same tarp shelter, guarding it even now, as if still trying to finish the mission. They brought him back gently, wrapped in a blanket. He was taken to a veterinary hospital, and even the vet, after reading the story, worked for free. News spread. People who had feared him now cried seeing his photo. The dog they'd labeled dangerous had, in truth, been their protector. He was weak, injured, and in pain, but he was alive. Sarah came to visit, Emily in her arms. The moment Rex saw the baby, he lifted his head and wagged his tail. The neighborhood changed after that, not all at once, but slowly. The Facebook post stopped blaming. The HOA dropped their talk of banning stray animals. People left dog food out, water bowls on porches, notes saying "Thank you, Rex." The shelter in the woods was torn down, the area cleaned, monitored, sealed. But one thing remained, the story about how one dog had sensed danger when no one else could, how he fought, bled, and warned them, even when they treated him like a threat. Weeks passed. Rex healed slowly. Officer Bradley visited often. He told the Johnsons that, once cleared, Rex would retire. No more K-9 missions. No more chasing danger. He'd done enough. The Johnsons offered something that surprised even themselves. "He can live here with us, if he wants to." Rex didn't bark. He just walked into the nursery one afternoon, curled up at Emily's crib, and slept, like he'd known all along that this was where he was supposed to be. It was strange how fast a home could change. Only a few weeks ago, the Johnson household had been on edge, tense with fear, locked doors, sleepless nights, baby monitor checks on the hour. But now it was different. There was still a kind of alertness in the air, but it wasn't rooted in fear anymore. It was watchfulness, because Rex was there. He didn't bark. He didn't whine. He barely even made a sound as he moved through the house. But you always knew where he was. At night, he lay just outside Emily's room, his body curled near the door, one ear twitching every so often, listening, guarding. During the day, he followed Sarah from room to room, like a silent shadow, never intrusive, never begging, just there. The presence of him, of this living, breathing second chance, made every moment feel safer, like nothing could get past him again, like whatever storm had passed through their lives had finally been shut out. Still, there were moments, quiet ones, where Sarah would look at Rex and wonder what exactly he had been through. There were scars beneath his fur, old ones and new. Some were clearly from the recent incident, gashes on his legs and ribs that had required stitches and careful care. But others looked older, deeper. She asked Officer Bradley one day, what kind of missions was he on before? The officer sighed. Bomb threats, drug raids, missing persons. Once he tracked a kidnapped child through 2 miles of forest. Sarah's eyes widened. And no one found him after the crash? Bradley shook his head. We looked. Believe me, we did. But sometimes the woods don't want to give back what they've taken. There was a pause. Then he added softer, I think the only reason he survived was because he had a reason to. A mission he hadn't finished. As Rex healed, his bond with Emily grew stronger. She was too young to understand who he was, or what he had done. But children have a way of knowing what adults miss. She would toddle over and place her small hand on his nose, sit next to him with her toys, share her snacks, and Rex let her. He never flinched when she climbed on his back, never pulled away when she curled up next to him for naps on the floor. It was as if he saw in her the purest thing worth protecting. Sarah captured a photo one day, Emily asleep on the rug, one arm draped over Rex's neck, her tiny fingers tangled at his fur. The dog's eyes were closed, his breathing steady. It was the first time he'd truly rested. The change in the neighborhood was slow, but steady. People who had once looked at Rex with suspicion now waved when they saw him in the yard. Kids who used to cross the street walked over to pet him gently, offering bits of cheese or beef jerky with shy smiles. The story had spread, not just the newspaper version, but the real version, passed through conversations, church gatherings, schoolyards, and backyard barbecues. The story of how a stray had saved a family, how a dangerous dog had faced danger alone, how a hero had gone unrecognized until it was almost too late. One morning, the Johnsons woke up to find their front porch covered in small gifts, dog treats, toys, blankets, handwritten notes. Thank you, Rex. You saved more than one life. We're sorry we didn't see it sooner. Sarah stood there reading the notes through tears, not because of guilt anymore, but because of healing. While the town began to embrace Rex, Officer Bradley faced a quiet struggle. He'd loved that dog like a brother. They'd gone through fires together, broken down doors, slept side by side in rainstorms during stakeouts. When Rex went missing, a part of Bradley had shut off, and now that he was found, a part of him wanted to bring Rex back home. But he couldn't ignore what he saw when he visited the Johnsons. He saw a family, not just people who had been saved, but people who needed Rex now just as much as he needed them. Rex no longer responded to commands the same way. He wasn't a K-9 officer anymore. He was something more. So Bradley sat down with Sarah and Mark one evening and said the words they never expected to hear. If you'll have him, I'd like Rex to stay with you. Despite the peace settling over the home, Sarah couldn't help but revisit the trauma of that night. The image of that man, tall, silent, dangerous, standing in her hallway, still haunted her. Sometimes she'd wake up gasping, heart pounding, the dream so vivid she could smell the dirt and sweat of him. But each time she'd find Rex there, watching, and something in his eyes told her, I'll never let that happen again. She learned later that the intruder had once been a landscaper for the area, fired for theft and strange behavior. He'd gone unnoticed, slipping into the cracks of society, driven by madness and obsession. They found drawings in the shelter, of houses, of rooms, of people. One of them was a child's bedroom. It wasn't just chance. He had been planning something for weeks, months maybe. Sarah held Emily closer after that, and she held Rex tighter, too. It was just a blanket, old, faded, frayed at the edges. But to Rex, it meant the world. It had been his K-9 station blanket back when he worked with Officer Bradley, worn down from years of training sessions, stakeouts, and cold kennel nights. It carried the scent of familiarity, the last trace of a life that once was. Officer Bradley gave it to Sarah in a paper bag, quietly and without ceremony. Rex sniffed it once, then laid down with a slow, heavy breath. His eyes closed instantly, not because he was tired, but because something inside him had finally unclenched. Mark noticed it too. The way Rex slept longer now, the way his breathing was less shallow, the way he no longer flinched at sudden sounds or turned away when someone reached to pet him. Healing had begun, not just in his body, but in his heart. It happened on a soft, sunny morning. Sarah was folding laundry on the couch, while Emily played on the carpet. Rex was nearby, lying on his side, one eye lazily watching the toddler as she stacked soft plastic blocks. And then, without prompting, without any warning, Emily looked straight at the dog and said, Ray. Sarah froze. What did you say, baby? Emily giggled, patted Rex's ear, and said again, a little clearer, "Rex." The dog lifted his head. Sarah clutched the basket against her chest, eyes welling with tears. It wasn't just a first word, it was a first bond, her daughter's first connection to something in this world. And it wasn't Mama, wasn't Dada, it was the name of the dog who had saved her life. From that day on, Rex became more than a guardian, he became family. Weeks later, Sarah received a letter, no return address, just a simple white envelope, slipped into the mailbox by hand. She opened it cautiously and read the contents in silence. It was from the wife of the intruder, a woman named Colleen. In shaky, handwritten lines, she explained how her husband had changed in the last year, how his paranoia and anger had become something darker, how she tried to get him help, but he disappeared one night and never came home. She wrote, "I'm sorry. I didn't know where he went. I didn't know what he'd become. I only know that I'm grateful no one was hurt, because it could have been so much worse. That dog saved your family. I hope you know that." Sarah folded the letter carefully. Then she placed it in the drawer where she kept Emily's birth certificate. Proof, not of pain, but of survival. It took a while, but eventually Sarah agreed to take Emily and Rex to the park. It was something small, but for her, it was a milestone. The last time she had left the house alone with Emily, fear had haunted her. She checked every corner, locked and unlocked the car door 5 times before pulling away, looked over her shoulder constantly, but this time, she had Rex, and when they arrived at the park, something remarkable happened. Rex didn't bark at the other dogs. He didn't growl or hide or cower. He sat, perfectly still, watching Emily as she climbed the small plastic slide. His eyes never left her, not once. Some of the other parents approached, recognizing the dog from the newspaper article. "He's really him, isn't he?" one of them asked, almost in disbelief. Sarah smiled softly. "Yeah, he really is." While Sarah focused on healing, Mark had quietly changed too. He didn't talk about it, but she noticed things. The way he stopped setting the alarm 5 times a night, the way he walked with more confidence down the driveway, the way he no longer jumped at every little noise outside. He even began helping other neighbors install new locks, cameras, or security lights. Not from fear, but from a place of strength. He told one neighbor, "You don't wait to be broken into to get serious about protection," then added, with a wry smile, "But if you're lucky, you might have someone like Rex watching over you." Sarah overheard that, and it warmed her more than she expected, not just because he was giving good advice, but because he was learning to trust the world again. One day, Officer Bradley visited with a duffel bag. Inside were Rex's old training tools, a chew sleeve, a clicker, a command chart, and a few toys, things that had once been part of his daily life. Rex's ears perked up as the bag opened. Bradley knelt in front of him and gave a quiet command. "Sit." Rex obeyed instantly. Another command, "Down." Rex dropped to the floor without hesitation. Sarah watched amazed. "He remembers?" Bradley nodded. "They never forget, not the good ones." Then he turned to Mark and Sarah. "You don't have to use the commands, but if you ever feel like he's restless, give him something to do. It helps him feel useful." That night, Mark tried one of the simpler drills, a short find-it game with a toy and some treats. Rex's tail wagged. His eyes lit up. He loved it, because even in retirement, Rex was still a soldier at heart. At first, they thought the nightmares were Emily's. She'd wake up crying, not screaming, just quiet, shaky sobs that made Sarah's heart break as she rushed into the room. But over time, they realized it wasn't just her. It was Rex too. Some nights, he'd whimper in his sleep. Other times, he'd jolt awake and pace the hallway, nose to the floor, as if searching for something or someone. Once, he stood by the front door for an hour, unmoving, just staring. Mark tried opening it, letting him outside, but Rex wouldn't go. He just waited. Whatever he was waiting for, it never came. They understood then that Rex carried scars they couldn't see, not just from the attack, not just from being shot, but from everything before. It happened on a rainy Thursday evening. Mark had been working in the basement when the power flickered and went out. No big deal, just a storm. He lit a flashlight and made his way up the stairs. But as he reached the top step, the beam of light cut across the hallway, and Rex froze. The dog's body stiffened. Then, faster than anyone could react, he lunged, barking with a growl no one had ever heard from him before. Mark dropped the flashlight and stumbled backward, heart racing. "Rex, it's me. It's okay." Sarah ran in just in time to see Rex standing protectively in front of Emily's room, his chest heaving, teeth bared, eyes locked on the flashlight still rolling across the floor. It took minutes to calm him down. Later, Bradley explained, In the field, some of the worst encounters he had were in dark places, with flashlights. It wasn't the light that scared him, it was the memory. Around the same time, Sarah began to feel something strange. A presence, not constant, not loud, but enough to raise goosebumps. One evening, while locking the back door, she saw something, a shape, in the distance near the tree line. By the time she called Mark over, it was gone. Probably a deer, probably nothing. But when she turned to look at Rex, his body was rigid, ears forward, low growl rumbling in his chest. Something was out there, and it wasn't just her imagination. The following weekend, Mark noticed something odd. The motion-activated camera at the side gate, the one he checked religiously every few days, had several recordings from the past week. Each video showed the same thing, a flicker of movement, a person-sized shadow, always at night, always near the same corner of the yard. Never enough to see a face, never enough to identify anything clearly. He didn't want to alarm Sarah, but he called Officer Bradley anyway. "I'm probably just being paranoid," Mark said. "But something's off." Bradley didn't dismiss it. He reviewed the footage, then asked a quiet question. "Does Rex sleep near the back door?" Mark blinked. "Yeah, every night." "Then you're not paranoid," Bradley said. "You're protected." One morning, while Sarah was cleaning the kitchen, Emily came toddling in with a drawing in hand, just crayons on printer paper. "Look, Mommy," she said cheerfully. Sarah smiled until she saw what was on the page. It was a house, their house, and next to it, a big black dog. But further off, drawn in shaky red crayon, was a figure, small, dark, with 2 dots for eyes. "Who's this baby?" Sarah asked gently, pointing to the figure. Emily shrugged. "He watches." Sarah's heart dropped. She didn't show Emily her fear. She praised the drawing, kissed her forehead, and hung it on the fridge like any other. But inside, her chest was tight. Rex, watching from the hallway, had seen the picture too, and he didn't blink for a long, long time. 3 days later, the storm rolled in. Heavy winds, pounding rain, branches cracking like gunshots across the neighborhood. The power went out. Rex was instantly alert, body tense, eyes scanning the darkness. Mark lit candles. Sarah checked the doors. They kept Emily close. It felt like deja vu, like a test of everything they'd been through. Then a knock. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the back door. Sarah froze. Mark looked toward Rex, who was already moving. In a blur of fur and fury, he reached the door and stood, muscles braced, a growl deep in his throat. Mark grabbed a flashlight, carefully this time, and turned it toward the glass. There was no one there, only the wind, only the trees, only Rex, still growling, still waiting. The next day, Officer Bradley returned to their house. He'd spent the night reviewing more camera footage, and what he found chilled him. From the shadows, a man had been watching their house. Different nights, different angles. He always stayed just beyond the camera's center view, but every now and then, just enough of a silhouette caught the corner. Enough to know it was the same person, the same build, the same posture, and the same intent. Bradley turned to Sarah and said, "I don't want to scare you, but we think he had an accomplice. Someone else who knew the house. Maybe someone who didn't get caught." Mark clenched his fists. "So this isn't over?" "No," Bradley said, "but you're not alone." He looked at Rex and added quietly, "Neither is he." After Bradley's warning, Sarah and Mark changed their habits. Doors locked by 6 p.m., curtains drawn tight, phone charged, flashlight on the dresser. Rex's bed was moved directly beneath the nursery window. They knew they couldn't live in fear forever, but this wasn't about paranoia. It was about preparedness. Rex seemed to sense it. His behavior sharpened. Less tail wagging, less rest. He was on guard, day and night. Sarah hated to see the shift in him. He wasn't relaxing anymore. He was anticipating, like a soldier waiting for orders that never came. Like he knew something was about to happen. Mark, still unsettled, borrowed a trail camera from a co-worker and mounted it on the old pine tree in their backyard. It wasn't connected to Wi-Fi, just motion triggered. The next morning, he checked the SD card. There, between images of squirrels and leaves fluttering in wind, was a single frame that made his breath catch. A man, partially masked, standing still, too still, right at the edge of the yard. He wasn't moving. He was watching. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. That night, Mark installed floodlights, silent alarms, and a second camera, one he didn't tell anyone about, just in case. One night, as Sarah lay half asleep beside Mark, she thought she heard something outside. A whisper, not words, not shouting, just the softest sound, like a breath through the trees. She almost dismissed it, until Rex stirred. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stood and faced the door. Sarah sat up, holding her breath. Then footsteps. Soft, distant. She slid from the bed and peeked through the curtain. No one, but Rex was still staring, still listening, and his stillness said more than any alarm ever could. The next morning, Bradley stopped by again, but this time, he looked tense. "I looked into that accomplice theory," he said, rubbing the back of his neck, "and I think I found something." Sarah and Mark exchanged nervous glances. The man who broke in last year. His brother was released from jail 3 months ago. He has no fixed address, no job, but was last seen in a town not far from here. Sarah's hands trembled. Why would he come back? Bradley sighed. Revenge. Maybe he blames Rex. Maybe he blames you. These guys don't need logic. They need excuses. Then he placed something on the table, a small box. Inside it was a GPS tracker. "Put this on Rex's collar," he said softly. "Not because I think he'll get lost, but because I think someone might try to take him." 2 nights later, Rex vanished. It was early morning, rainy, gray. Sarah came downstairs and found his bed empty. She called out. Nothing. She ran to the back door, unlocked, wide open. No Rex, just wet footprints in the mud, paw prints and boots. She screamed. Mark came running. Together they followed the tracks, heart pounding, lungs burning. But halfway down the path, the prints vanished, as if the storm had washed everything clean. Gone. No blood, no fur, no sign of struggle, just silence. Mark remembered the GPS tracker. Frantically, he opened the app. The dot blinked, active, less than a mile away. He grabbed his jacket, kissed Sarah, and ran. Every step was agony. Fear curled like smoke in his throat. He followed the signal down a dirt road, into a clearing, behind a broken-down shack. And there, tied loosely to a post, was Rex, muddy, shivering, but alive. Mark fell to his knees. Rex leaned into him, not barking, not whining, just breathing. It was as if he had let himself be taken, and then waited. When the police arrived, they searched the shack. No one was there, no one nearby, but on the inside of the door, scrawled in black marker, was a message. He took my brother. Now I take his. The handwriting was uneven, desperate, but what chilled them more was that he didn't take anything. No child, no money, no harm, just Rex. And somehow, Rex had survived again. In the days that followed, things didn't return to normal. Not right away. Sarah double-locked everything. Emily cried more at night. Mark barely slept. But Rex stayed close to them like never before. He didn't sleep at the back door anymore. He slept in Emily's room, by choice, by instinct. And the little girl, once so fragile, once so shy, curled up next to him like he was her missing puzzle piece. There was no safer place in the world for her than right beside him. Word spread quickly about what happened. Neighbors dropped off treats, notes, even flowers. Someone sent a hand-sewn vest for Rex that read, "Hero Dog." The local newspaper ran another story. But the best surprise came when Bradley visited again, this time in full uniform. He knelt beside Rex and smiled. "You may not be on the force anymore," he said, attaching something to Rex's collar. But once a K9, always a K9. It was a new tag. It read valor, loyalty, family. It was a quiet Sunday night. Too quiet. No wind, no rain, just a heavy stillness that made the house feel wrapped in cotton. Mark was dozing in the recliner. Sarah had just turned off the hallway light. Emily was fast asleep, curled under her pink blanket, and Rex was missing. At first, Sarah thought he was in the kitchen or the living room, but he wasn't. Not in the laundry room, not by the front door, not even at the foot of Emily's bed. She turned to call for him. When she heard it, a sound, not loud, not crashing, just the softest click, like a door unlocking. She froze. Something was wrong. She crept toward the nursery, slow, careful, and as she entered Emily's room, she saw it. The window was open, not wide, just enough. Enough for a hand, enough for someone to reach inside. And beside the window, a chair. One they didn't put there, one they hadn't moved, one someone else must have. Her voice caught in her throat. "Emily," she whispered. The little girl stirred, still asleep. But then, from the far corner of the room, where shadows clung like dust, a figure moved. Before Sarah could scream, Rex exploded into the room like a cannon. No bark, no hesitation, just 80 pounds of muscle and memory slamming into the intruder's chest. The man went down hard, a thud and a gasp. Rex's jaws locked on the man's arm, teeth flashing in the moonlight. The stranger screamed, kicking wildly, trying to shake the dog off. But Rex didn't budge. He remembered this scent, this man, this threat. He had waited for him, prepared for this moment, trained for it, lived for it. Mark burst into the room with a flashlight and a baseball bat in hand, but stopped cold at the sight. Rex snarling, the man pinned, Sarah standing frozen, and Emily just beginning to wake up. And then, a second figure appeared outside the window, gun raised. Mark dove forward, instinct screaming. A single shot fired, glass shattered. Rex yelped. Time froze. There was blood, on the floor, on the wall, on Rex's fur. Sarah screamed. Mark rushed to Rex's side. The first man, now moaning on the floor, was bleeding from his arm where Rex had clamped down. The second man had disappeared into the darkness, but Rex lay still, too still. A red patch bloomed at his side. He blinked once, tried to stand, collapsed. "Stay with me, buddy," Mark whispered, pressing his hands to the wound. "You hear me? Stay." Emily crawled to him. "Rex," he licked her hand, and closed his eyes. They didn't wait for an ambulance. Mark lifted Rex into the back seat. Sarah sat beside him, holding a towel to the wound. Emily stayed with Officer Bradley, who had arrived within minutes, radioing for backup. The ride was quiet except for Sarah whispering, "Don't go. Please don't go." Every red light ran. Every second counted. And through it all, Rex stayed silent, his chest rising, falling, but slower and slower, until the vet's table was cold, the lights harsh. They rushed him in. Techs yelled terms Sarah didn't understand. Sutures, trauma, blood pressure dropping. "We'll do everything we can," the vet said. Then she disappeared behind swinging doors. Mark and Sarah stood in silence, holding hands, not praying, just waiting. Minutes passed like hours, hours like lifetimes. At 4:27 a.m., the vet stepped out, her face unreadable. Sarah stood. Mark held his breath. "He made it," she said softly. "It was close, but he made it." They broke. Tears, laughter, collapse. They were told he'd need weeks to heal, but he'd live. He had saved their daughter, their family, and still come back, just like he always had. A week later, Rex came home. He limped a little, slept a lot, but when Emily saw him, she lit up like the sunrise. She ran to him, careful but joyful, and hugged his neck. He leaned his head on her lap. The circle was complete, and though the house still had alarms, still had cameras, still had scars, it had Rex, and that was enough. One last surprise came in the mail a few days later. A commendation from the governor's office, a medal, a letter, and one simple sentence, handwritten at the bottom. Not all heroes wear badges. Some wear fur. Mark framed it, and above the mantel, beside a family photo and a candle for peace, they placed Rex's old collar, worn, faded, but never forgotten. Time didn't heal all wounds, but it did soften them. The glass was replaced, the locks upgraded, the house grew quieter with each passing week. But Rex healed in his own way. His limp faded, his fur grew back, his eyes remained just as alert, just as watchful. He no longer barked at every creak or gust of wind. He didn't have to. His family was safe, and he knew it. Emily stopped waking from nightmares. She slept deeply again, often with her small fingers curled in Rex's fur. Mark and Sarah talked more, held each other more, and kept fewer secrets. Their marriage, once haunted by silence, was now wrapped in gratitude. Every dinner, every sunset, every birthday from that day on felt earned. People in town still whispered about that night. The intruders were caught, sentenced, forgotten by most, but not by the Johnsons. They didn't forget because they'd lived it, because they knew the cost of safety and the price of bravery. The local paper ran another headline. Hero dog saves family again. The vet clinic hung Rex's photo in their lobby, right between a plaque for service animals and a drawing made by Emily, titled My Best Friend. And Officer Bradley made sure that every officer, rookie or veteran, knew one thing: never underestimate an old dog with a good heart. Months later, Sarah found herself standing in the backyard one evening. The sun was dipping below the treeline. The shadows were long, but not threatening. Rex sat beside her, watching, calm. She smiled, not because the danger had disappeared, but because the fear had. They had faced something dark and walked through it together, as a family. And standing there, hand on his back, she realized something. Rex hadn't just saved their daughter, he'd saved them all. This wasn't just a story about a home invasion, not just a story about a canine with instincts that never faded. It was a story about loyalty, about second chances, about what happens when we listen to those who can't speak, but always understand. Rex wasn't just a pet, he wasn't just a hero, he was their protector, their reminder, their anchor. When the world grew loud and dangerous, he stood between them and the storm, not because he was trained to, because he loved them. And sometimes, That's the most powerful force there is. If this story touched your heart, if it made you tear up, smile, or hug your pet a little tighter, then please, don't just scroll away. At Paws and Claws, we believe that animals are more than just companions. They're protectors, healers, and family. And stories like Rex's remind us that love, loyalty, and courage often come from the quietest heroes. If you believe animals deserve to be celebrated, protected, and remembered, subscribe to our channel right now. We post new emotional animal stories every week. Stories that inspire, heal, and stay with you long after the video ends. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had a pet that changed your life? A moment where your dog or cat did something you'll never forget? Share your story below. We read every comment. And don't forget to like this video if you felt the bond between Rex and his family. And share it with someone who needs a reminder that real heroes sometimes come on four legs and with wagging tails. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing. And thank you for being part of the Paws and Claws family.